America, first black elected office in America is 1641. First black elected office in Great Britain is 1987. First black elected office in Russia is 2010. 1641, and we're the bad guys in this? No, we weren't perfect.
Who was that person, and what was the office?
Matthias D'Souza, who was elected in Maryland.
And if people fell into political disfavor, they were airbrushed. The photographs were airbrushed. The books involving them were removed from publication. We've got a movement in this country to do precisely the same thing with Photoshop,
That's right.
with history being removed.
We own 160,000 original documents, and right now we're working with someone who owns one of the rarest documents in American history, one of the very first, it's not a document, it's an artifact, one of the very first artifacts. And at this point, he's been offered millions for that artifact, and the people who want to buy from him want to destroy it. They want to melt it down and make it disappear so it's not there anymore. So we literally have movements in America to eradicate this stuff, because if you don't know your history, you can be led in a different direction. If, for example, all these guys were atheists, agnostics, deists, well, we've turned out pretty good with a bunch of secular guys. But what if they were all faith guys? What if they were all God guys? And that's what made us turn out the way we did. And now we're being told today, no, secular is really good. Well, that doesn't hold up. So knowing our history helps direct what we become today. It has a lot to do with who we are. And even with critical race theory and what's happening with the 1619 Project, they say, oh, a bunch of racists. No, this is where the first emancipation in the world began. By 1804, every northern colony had abolished slavery. Nowhere in the world abolished slavery before we did in 1804. It took the South a long time to come along, 1865, but America was the fourth in the world to abolish slavery totally in 1865 out of 128 nations. So we're still a world's leader, but we just don't know that. And so we buy into stuff that's not true today. We really need to know truth.
Was it the United States or was it Great Britain which led the impetus to remove slavery?
It was the United States that did. Great Britain abolished slavery in 1833. Now, we had done so in 1804 in all the northern colonies. We didn't do it till 1865, but in the meantime, Great Britain did it in 1833. They became
at the
first
same
nation.
time, correct me if I'm wrong, they used the British Navy and at great expense and great loss of life to intercept the slave trade from Africa. Two
navies, the American Navy and the British Navy. We had what was called the African Squadron, and from 1819 to 1861, we kept a squadron, America kept a squadron with Great Britain off the coast of Africa to intercept any slave ships going there to take slaves off.
So what did they do with those slave ships once they were apprehended?
Well, once they apprehended, they turned them back, or they would take the slaves and free the slaves. So African coast is, what, 4,000 miles long, so there's no way a squadron protects all of it. But they did turn back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ships. And
now, is that being taught anywhere in American history?
It's not being taught anywhere. It's not being taught anywhere, and that's part of America and Great Britain. In the War of 1812, when we ended the war, part of our peace treaty said both of us are going to go fight slavery in the world. And so as a result of the 1812 peace treaty, 1815, both nations sent squadrons to Africa to stop the slave trade. So America is one of the early, and by the way, America, first black elected office in America is 1641. First black elected office in Great Britain is 1987. First black elected office in Russia is 2010. 1641, and we're the bad guys in this? No, we weren't perfect.
Who was that person, and what was the office?
Matthias D'Souza, who was elected in Maryland. Matthias D'Souza in Maryland, and then you got Wentworth Cheswell in New Hampshire, and you got Thomas Hercules in New York, or in Philadelphia. All these black heroes we don't know. I've got to stack all these black patriots and black elected founding father era guys.
And do you think that that stuff is not being taught today because it lends credence to the stuff that these guys did? That it's combined and inseparable?
Well, it's not taught today because it doesn't help other agendas get where they want to. You know, part of Marxism is you have to have conflict. And if black and white relations aren't as bad as they tell us, then it's harder for them to get the conflict they want. So if they can make people angry by not teaching history, they will. And they don't care whether it's race or gender or age, or they're going to find something to create friction on. But the better we know our history, the harder it is for us to be led astray into something that's destructive.
Where did those words, all men are created equal, come from? Do you have any documentation here which lends...
Not here, but I do have a lot of documentation on it, and it's interesting because if you go to...
But there are passages here from the Bible.
Yes, yes. And it's interesting, if you look at the Declaration of Independence, specifically, historians have documented that every single right set forth in the Declaration had been preached from the American pulpit prior to 1763. So John Adams, he was asked, a young man was doing a history book in 1816 and asked Adams, said, you were there, I wasn't. Who are the great thinkers that gave you your ideas? And John Adams said, well, it was the Reverend Samuel Cooper, it was the Reverend Charles Chauncey, it was the Reverend, he went through all these preachers, he went through Jonathan Mayhew. And so these guys learned all men are created equal out of the Bible, is where they got it. Now, the political guys took it forward and put it in policy, but it's first being, one of the first...
What was the first book? What was the first printing press?
Yeah, first printing press is exactly the Bible. And the Reverend John Wise, he did a book in 1692 that talked about all men are created equal. He showed from the Bible where the taxation of that representation is tyranny. And he said in the Bible, God wants the consent of the governed. Now, all of those phrases appeared in the Declaration later because in 1772, the Sons of Liberty reprinted the sermons of John Wise and spread them all across America to show the right thinking about government. So literally, Calvin Coolidge, on the 150th anniversary of the Declaration, said the Reverend John Wise is the founding father of America. 100 years before the founding fathers, he gave the founding fathers the language they put in the Declaration. And so these are things we used to know, the impact of the thinking, what shaped it back then. Preachers like John Wise, well, that's 100 years before the Declaration, but he's the guy who wrote it down, and the Founding Fathers reprinted it and spread it all over America through the committees of correspondence. So it's important stuff.
So we understand now, in light of all this that you're saying, what the importance of revisionist history is, or the erasure of history, and what can be achieved when you erase history.
You know, one of the great examples is in 1902, a famous history book came out. It was called The People's History of the United States, or the History of the American People, excuse me. The History of the American People is by Woodrow Wilson. At that time, he was a professor at 3 different universities.
He's been canceled, by the way.
He's been canceled. He needs to be. We have that 5-volume set, and in that 5-volume set, there is not a single black person mentioned in his volume set, not even Frederick Douglass, who's photographed more often than Abraham Lincoln. So all the black patriots are gone. He canceled every black patriot. Academics love his book because he's the president of Princeton University. How smart is he? And so they picked up a book that is racist inherently, and as a result,
he was heretical to the foundations of Princeton University.
He was heretical. He's the first non-clergyman at Princeton, and he is open, hardcore racist. And he called for the abolition of the Declaration of Independence. He said, we got to get away from that. We got to get away from all men are created equal. Yeah, because he's the guy who helped bring back the second revival of the Klan. That's where our history got changed in the 20th century, and we don't even know it.
Repeat that again. Woodrow Wilson is indirectly responsible for the revival of the Ku Klux Klan?
Wilson is
a Democratic president.
Democratic president.
One of the great progressives of all time.
Great progressives, and he was so progressive, he said we need to progress past the Constitution Declaration. And that was part of his advocacy, is don't get stuck on old documents.
And he was very instrumental in removing some constitutional rights, especially during World War I.
He removed a lot of constitutional rights. When he came into office, a number of blacks were already in federal government. We started electing, 1851, William Nell was in the federal government as a black man. He wrote a great history book on all the blacks in the American Revolution, the American founding. When Woodrow Wilson got in office, he took out every black person in federal office except one and left them there as a token black. I mean, that's just the racism of Woodrow Wilson. And so the fact that we don't know our own black history is not a problem with it not being there. It's a problem with what Woodrow Wilson did with academics getting away from teaching black history.
What kind of reception do you receive when you go to college campuses or people who write textbooks, people in authority regarding history, and try to present this story that you're telling us today?
When I go into what would be considered a hostile environment like this settings, I take the stuff with me. And I'll show all the black history documents. I've got, right off stage, I've got a whole bunch of black history documents signed by elected black officials in the 1760s, 1770s. George Washington, his writings, and Lafayette, they both point to a black man as the reason the American Revolution ended at Yorktown. James Armistead, they both have so much to say. He's the first double spy in American history. They both credit him with their ability to capture Cornwallis and end the war. And we don't teach James Armistead today. Or we don't teach Jack Sisson.
Is he honored anywhere in the United States today?
He has been. He was honored. He used to be known. But again, in the 20th century, we just don't know these guys. Literally, Jack Sisson, who's probably the first SEAL team member, but it was back in 1778, a black man. There were 20 blacks and 20 whites who led a SEAL team type mission to rescue the second in command of the American Army. And Jack Sisson, this black patriot, just amazing what he did. We used to study those stories. We knew that the American Revolution, every single unit in the American Revolution was integrated. We had integrated units, not segregated units. And it was a volunteer army. The average black man in the American Revolution served 9 times longer than the average white man, just re-enlisting, just going back and fighting for the country. So the whole notion of that we see today is just not accurate to what actually happened.
You know, this is a revelation to me, and I know to a lot of our viewers. I wish it wasn't the 4th of July, because people are out having a good time.
Yeah. They
could be enjoying this. This is the best 4th of July I've had in a long time. So thank you so much. You got to come back, because I know there's so much more. And I got to come to your place, to your museum.
Love to have you, Doug. Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Hi, I'm Doug McKelway, and thank you for watching Centerpoint. We hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Leave a comment below and keep the conversation going by sharing this video with a friend who needs to see it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.